What is the political abuse of psychiatry? Political abuse of psychiatry refers to the misuse of psychiatric diagnosis, treatment, and detention for the purposes of obstructing the fundamental human rights of certain individuals and groups in a given society. Political abuse is typical in totalitarian regimes. States view anyone opposed to the regime or criticises the state as mentally ill. These individuals would be diagnosed with sluggish schizophrenia. Symptoms include reformed delusions, struggle for the truth, perseverance, and a heightened sense of self-esteem. There have been reports of political abuse of psychiatry made throughout the globe over the past century. However, many of these reports are restricted to isolated incidents. When it comes to the Soviet Union and the PRC, however, the evidence suggesting the misuse of psychiatry by authorities is extensive. Political abuse of psychiatry occurred in the Soviet Union during the 1960s up until the late 1980s. Political abuse of psychiatry in the PRC has been occurring since the beginning of the 21st century and continues to this day. The political abuse of psychiatry occurs or has occurred in places such as Russia, Belarus, the PRC, and Kazakhstan. However, there have been reports of political abuse of psychiatry across the globe in places such as New Zealand, where a politician was taken into mental health care after declaring an investigation into corruption of a New Zealand political party, to India, where psychiatrists were sent to an anti-nuclear protest in 2012 to help the protesters learn the importance of the plant.
Why do states abuse psychiatry? As Van Voren argues, authorities resort to the internment of dissenters for expedience and ideology. Firstly, sending dissenters to psychiatric institutions is practical. People can be locked away for an unlimited period of time or until the state believes they are no longer dangerous. Legal and medical procedures and investigations can, in some cases, also be bypassed, especially when internment occurs without public knowledge. However, in many cases, rules and legal procedures are followed as they would normally be when a person is prosecuted. Secondly, sending dissenters to psychiatric institutions enables governments the ability to suppress opposing views. Anyone who disagrees with the state is mentally ill and should be ignored. This enables states to ensure they have 100% support of the population. This means states can continue controlling society and advancing their ideological goals. The treatments involved were aimed at breaking the prisoners, and this was done in three forms: physical stresses, psychological stresses, and pharmacological stresses. The former overstimulated the prisoner through means of cell overcrowding, physical constraints, decreasing opportunities for personal hygiene, and malnutritious diets. Psychological stresses were targeted at the prisoner's psyche through modes of stigmatization, unclear terms of incarceration, inflicting fear and shame on prisoners for their illness, demanding prisoners go against their past political views and align with the regime ideology, and other psychological stresses saw the prisoners in solitary confinement. Pharmacological stresses were the medicines prescribed to the prisoners, inflicting different behaviours and reactions that would either lead to their demise, further prove their so-called insanity, or would nullify the prisoner's brain enough to accept the beliefs they were being told to follow.
Political abuse of psychiatry in the Soviet Union developed from the idea that persons opposed to the regime were mentally ill. What sane person would oppose the best socio-political system in the world? Professor Shnevnevsky from the Moscow School of Psychiatry was responsible for the development of the term sluggish schizophrenia. Political abuse of psychiatry in the Soviet Union greatly benefited from the fact that since 1950 only one view on psychiatry was permitted, which resulted in a virtually complete monopoly of the Moscow School of Psychiatry headed by Professor Andrei Shnevnevsky. Psychiatrists at the time saw the diagnosis as logical. Why would someone be willing to give up their job or family over a strange idea no one agreed with? As a result of the broad, vague symptoms of sluggish schizophrenia, this condition was diagnosed far more frequently in Russia compared to other countries. Thousands of dissenters were hospitalised for political reasons. So there's a few different statistics to look at But in 1966, the Soviet Department of Science and Education reported 2 million people in need of psychiatric help. This grew to 3.7 million by 1971. In the 1980s, the Soviet Union diagnosed 3 times as many schizophrenic patients as the US and twice as many as West Germany, Austria, and Japan. In 1990, a source listed 340 victims of political abuse.
Abuse of psychiatry has been used in China to ensure any dissidents, religious infidels, and whistleblowers are silenced one way or another. Anyone with non-conforming or problematic opinions within China are labelled as dangerous to society and viewed as extremists, therefore requiring intervention from the state, whether it be prison sentences or psychiatric treatment. The major contributing factor for the abuse within China is the widely lowered threshold for extremists and limited tolerance for dissidents against the leading party. China's acquittal rate for crimes against the state is almost non-existent, but for cases where an individual is found not guilty, a loophole used by the party is judging not guilty on grounds of mental insanity. Consequences of such abuses within multiple regimes may seem obvious, being another tool by the state to have complete control and being able to silence dissidents. There is another consequence which may be lesser thought about in the shadow of such abuses of power. This is the state of mental health services within those countries. Rightfully so, this is a lesser problem than an authoritarian government silencing all criticism. However, mental health is a considerable factor for overall health. How effective can China and Russia's healthcare system be when the overwhelming use of it is to silence dissidents with no mental disorders? As stated by the UN, right to healthcare is a fundamental human right, meaning this is just another violation by such countries.